Welcome everyone. My name is Sarah McCabe and I have been contracted by the team at Switch Your Thinking to talk to you today about one of my favourite things to talk about, which is home energy efficiency. Before we begin, I would just like to acknowledge traditional owners of the land in which I'm coming from today, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, and as well as all of the owners of the various lands that you come from today, possibly across WA, and pay my respects to their elders past and present. A little bit of background about myself. I've worked in the sustainability field for 20 years or so now. The last 10 of them have really been focused on solar and energy efficiency and EV projects. I've worked in local government, done lots of solar and energy efficiency projects on public buildings, and now my current other life, I work with nonprofits doing similar stuff, but more focused on providing advice and developing business cases for this type of work. I guess my other relevant experience is that in my own house now, after several years of progressive upgrades, I've been working through the process of becoming more energy efficient and going all electric. But there's always still more to do. It is a constant process of refining and continuous improvement. What I'm not is an electrician. So if you're here to ask me some sort of detailed electrical question, I'm not your person. The same goes if it's a plumbing question. My experience is really around energy and carbon management as a whole. But I hope what I do bring to these webinars is that kind of unique consumer perspective, which will help you in your journey. Just a disclaimer, I have prepared this workshop to the best of my ability using my experience and research, but this is a rapidly evolving field and I'm also only human. So please do your own research if there's anything you're not entirely sure about. So you might be wondering who Switch Your Thinking is. Switch Your Thinking is a sustainability initiative founded in 2002 by the City of Armidale, the City of Gosnells and the Shire of Serpentine Jarrahdale, and they all work together as the Southeast Regional Energy Group. And Switch Your Thinking's main objective is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions through lots of different energy, water, sustainable building, waste and sustainable transport initiatives. And they currently work with 16 local governments across Perth to help empower and educate the residents and businesses in those areas. And a big part of that work is putting on lots of different workshops like this one, as well as some other projects. If you're interested in any of the work that they're doing, go and have a look at their website. You can follow them on all the different socials. And also, I guess, best of all is to sign up to their e-news. And that way you can find out about all of the different events and things that they're doing that are coming up. This particular workshop, though, is a little bit different to most Switch Your Thinking workshops because it's part of their energy efficiency pilot program, which has been running over the past few months and is funded and supported by the WA government's Department of Energy and Economic Diversification. So this is a program that's open to everyone across WA. And the project is funding lots of free workshops on lots of different energy related topics. I'm doing some of the other ones on energy, solar panels and also on electric vehicles. But it's not just workshops, it's also funding energy audit kits, which are now available to borrow from more than 100 different libraries and community resource centres all around the state. And that's a picture of the kit there. It's got lots of cool stuff in it. Most exciting, I think, is the thermal camera. Really cool piece of equipment, which, yeah, is expensive to buy or even to rent, and really useful for checking things like your insulation and air gaps, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. So, yeah, ask your local library if they've got one of these energy audit kits, and if you like, borrow them. We're going to talk about it in a lot more detail today. The other great thing about this project is that just by attending one of the workshops or by borrowing one of the energy audit kits and completing a feedback form, you could win an in-person home energy audit. Or if you're building a home and you've got plans, a NATA's assessment, which is like a sustainability assessment on your new home design. So terms and conditions apply to that. See the Switch website for more details. At the end, I'm going to put up a QR code that you can scan to access that feedback form. Make sure I don't forget. Sometimes I get carried away talking about the things I like talking about and I forget, but yes, we'll put that up at the end so you can fill out that feedback form. All right, so what are we going to talk about today? Firstly, we're going to talk about why you might want to save energy, and within that, sort of the bigger picture about going all electric and all renewable. We're going to talk about energy consumption in an average home and how you can use that to target where you do your energy efficiency initiatives. We're going to talk about your electricity bills and how you can use them to reduce your energy use. And then we're going to talk about saving electricity and reducing costs in the big four: heating and cooling, appliances, hot water, and lighting. And then finally, throughout all that, we'll talk about auditing your home with the Home Energy Efficiency Kit. Hopefully that covers all the things you'd like to talk about. There are many, 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 many things that you can do to improve your energy efficiency. But today I'm going to get strategic and we're just going to talk about the big stuff. So these are the things that should hopefully shift your bill the most for the least cost. And that's because we've only got an hour, but also because our brains can only deal with so much at one time. So what we like to do is do the big things first, and then you can move on to the smaller impact things. I'm going to be referring to lots and lots of links with further information or resources today. Don't worry, you won't have to copy them down. At the end, I've got a QR code which you can scan, which has a document with all of those links in them. And if I have time, I'm also going to try and grab the link and pop that in the chat as well. I should have done that beforehand, but I forgot. You're also welcome to pop questions in the chat as I go along, but I'm just not very good at reading the chat and talking at the same time. I'm not great at multitasking. So the questions can sit there and I will get to them at the end. But don't feel like I'm ignoring you if I haven't answered your question in the chat. Okay, so why save energy? Number one reason people want to reduce their energy use is they have received a gas or an electricity bill and it's given them a facial expression, a bit like these poor people here. Energy bill shock is a really big motivator for reducing most people's energy use. The next one is a comfortable home. So a home that uses a lot of energy to heat or cool is very difficult to make comfortable, even if you're heating and cooling it a lot. So do you want to be like the people at the top or the guy down the bottom? And the third reason is to make the most of your solar panels if you've got them already or you're planning on getting them. So energy efficiency is just one part of a bigger picture. So most people would have heard of the waste hierarchy, like reduce, reuse, recycle. And there is something sort of similar for energy, but no one's really been able to come up with a cute little saying for it. So up the very top there, you can see we've got reduce or avoid energy use as much as possible. So obviously, if you can avoid installing or buying energy consuming appliances altogether, that's always going to be the cheapest because it saves you both on the upfront and the ongoing running costs. Then there's energy efficiency. So if you really need those things, what is the most efficient option? And that way, if you have solar panels or you're planning on getting solar panels in the future, by doing those two things, you're making it more likely that your solar panels are going to be able to cover your energy use as much as possible. And then you should have some left over, which you can use to get off gas and shift to electric appliances. And that way, you're not going to be applying for gas over here when you've got excess solar over here going basically for free. And then after that, you might even like to consider getting off fuel as well and using your excess solar to charge your car. So in real life, never works as neatly as that. It might take you a while to do those things because you generally only replace, equipment and stuff every 10 to 15 years or so. But it's kind of good to see that bigger picture when you embark on that journey. And of course, in the meantime, if you can't install solar, you're still going to reduce your bills and your carbon emissions by looking at your energy efficiency. So today we're going to talk a little bit about the top two levels and a little bit about the third level because there is some crossover there. And I do other workshops on solar and electric vehicles, which are like the three pieces of the puzzle. So you might like to come along to some of them as well to find out about the rest of the puzzle. So going all electric, Rewiring Australia is a really fantastic organisation that have crunched some of the numbers on how much is going to save people by going all electric and what that means for our carbon emissions as well. And so you can see on that slide, it's actually a really huge difference. And that's by making 6 key decisions, which is solar, a battery, heat pump hot water, induction cooktops, and finally electric vehicles, as long with making your house as energy efficient as possible. So Rewiring Australia, great website to go and have a look at if you'd like to find out more about that. And finally, of course, the other reason for looking at energy efficiency is a safer climate. And you can, so this graph just shows you how global average temperature has been rising for some time. We've had this big jump in the last couple of years, and that just kind of shows how urgently we need to continue to act on this and do everything that we can. All right, so that brings me to something that's very important to know when you're looking at making your house more energy efficient, and that is, how is energy measured? So I think we'll start with a watt, and everyone knows a watt because it's watts on your light bulb box. So you can see there my little light bulb down there. It's a 4-watt light bulb. And so a watt is how much power your appliance is using at any moment in time. And kilo just means 1,000, and a kilowatt is 1,000 watts. So you you can compare my 4-watt light bulb there with my electric oil-filled column heater, and that's the little nameplate that's on my column heater, and you can see that uses up to 2,400 watts, or 2.4 kilowatts. A kilowatt hour is how much power energy your appliance is using over time. So if your heater is drawing 2.4 kilowatts for 1 hour, it will have used 2.4 kilowatt hours. If it was drawing 2.4 kilowatts for half an hour, it will have used 1.2 kilowatt hours. And a kilowatt hour is a unit in your power bill. So these two things are confused all of the time, but you can see they measure quite different things. And it's important for you to know as we go through the presentation, because I'll be talking about those two things a bit. All right, so the first step to addressing your energy efficiency is to get out your power bill. And if you don't have them all filed neatly at home, I definitely don't. The easiest way to do that is to go to your Synergy My account, log into the online portal, and then you can see there's a place where you can click Bills and Payments up the top, and that's all of your PDF power bills in there, along with a bunch of other cool information. So when you do that, have a look at your latest power bill, and you might look at it and you go, well, it seems quite high to me, but how do I know? That might actually be normal. Maybe I'm already efficient, and that's just how much, power kind of costs now. How do you know that? And the first step is to look at the little beige section there, and you can see if your bill is very different to the same your last bill, or the same time last year. And you look at the same time last year because your energy use obviously changes a lot across the seasons, and last year is the last comparable time period. You can also click on the Energy Tips tab in My Account, and there's this little comparison here which compares your household with other houses of a similar size in your area. And you'll get that slightly judgmental emoji if your bill is a little bit high, like it is here. If you've got lots of gas appliances, you can't just pat yourself on the back for having low electricity use and move on. You also need to look at your gas bills and do a similar thing. So down the bottom is kind of an example of a typical gas bill and how it might look. So I guess if your energy use, either your gas or your electricity, is higher than average, or it might be time to start thinking about why that's the case. And if you can't think of anything, start conducting an investigation into what's happening in your household. And to do that, you need a plan. And so that plan is first we start looking at the typical big consumers in a household and use that as a starting point. Then we're going to talk about how you might find out how much they're using in your house specifically, because you might not be average. And then we're going to talk about what you can do about it to reduce your energy use in each of those areas. So these are the big consumers that you need to look out for, and this is a really good starting point for investigating your energy use. So this is a breakdown of energy consumption in an average Australian home. And you can see we always start with heating and cooling, because that is where you can get the biggest cuts in energy consumption, because it makes up 40% of an average home's energy use. But that's based on an average house. You might not be average. How do you know what it is in your house? In an ideal world, we'd always go first to real data. So that might be like you'd have some sort of special energy monitor that would monitor your heating and cooling use separately. But I don't know anyone who actually has that in their house. So the next best thing is to use something like this, which is on Synergy's website in the energy tips section of the My Account portal. And basically, this is, yeah, a calculator that shows you the energy use of different things in your house, and this is the heating and cooling one. So it's really cool. I've only just discovered this. In it, you can go in and select what type of heating and cooling you've got. You can select how many days you use it. You can how many hours it's running for, and its set point as well as temperature set point. And so that will give you the average estimated sort of cost per bill. And so therefore that's quite easy to compare to your total bill and give you a bit of an estimate of the percent that makes up to your household energy use. And therefore how much focus that you need to put on to reducing it. Now, the really great thing about this calculator is you can go in there and you can change things. So you can change how many hours it runs. If you reduce it by just an hour, you can change the temperature setting, and that will show you how much doing those very small changes will reduce your energy use. And it gives you some other tips down the bottom as well. So it's a really handy thing to have a look at. So now you know how much your heating and cooling makes up of your energy bill. What can you do about it? And to address this properly, you kind of need to think about an esky. It's kind of an esky is insulated all around. So if you put a teeny tiny air conditioner or a heater in an esky, it would get hot or cold very quickly, and it would stay that way for a long period of time without a lot of additional energy input. So a house, of course, is quite different to an esky. You need airflow in a house, but the idea is if you can kind of identify the areas that heat and cool are being lost from your house and reduce that as much as possible, you're going to reduce the number of hours that you need to run your heating and cooling. So that diagram there is from the Your Home Technical Manual, which is a really great resource, and I put links to that in the links document. But it basically shows you where most of your heat is lost and gained in a house. And you can see the big one is the ceiling, and that's followed by windows, and then after by air leakage. So if you can reduce heat transfer in those areas, you're not going to ever eliminate it completely, but it's going to make your house much easier to heat and cool. So the big one is your ceiling, and that is why people talk about roof insulation so much. So if you don't have ceiling insulation, I recommend you get it. The minimum at the moment, it depends a bit what sort of climate zone you're in and a few different things, but it's around about sort of 4.1. And the R value is basically a measure of how insulating the insulation is. And it's basically kind of the minimum for new builds now. If you do have insulation already, you might want to check it's okay. And a really great safe way of doing that is to use your thermal camera, which is in your energy audit kit. So there are lots of different stories, particularly in recently built houses, where the builders have just not installed the insulation like they're legally required to, or like the bats have just been thrown up there and they're still in their packets, or probably more commonly, it's just been installed very badly. Or the other thing that could be wrong with your insulation is it's been there a really long time and it's thinned, or like a tradie's come in and shifted it and not put it back again. There's all sorts of stuff that might mean your insulation is not working properly. So those are the kinds of things that you'll pick up pretty quickly with a thermal camera. A badly insulated house will look a little bit like this. So this is actually wall insulation. So when I had my kitchen renovated, they pulled the tiles off and the gyprock came off the wall. So that was a little bit annoying, but I did get to see the insulation that was behind the wall. And in this particular part of the house, it wasn't very great. So you can see down the bottom left-hand corner there, I don't know what happened there. They probably just ran out. You can see it's kind of squished up. You can see there's gaps on the other side. And even small gaps in your insulation can reduce its effectiveness by quite a lot. So though that might be what your insulation's looking like behind the wall or the gyprock if you're using your thermal camera and it's not looking so good. So if you use your thermal camera from your energy audit kit and you're seeing some hot areas on there, that's when it might be an idea to get an insulation specialist out to have a look. And what do those thermal camera pictures look like? So just to illustrate this point, these are some pictures I took with my thermal camera on a very hot day. It was more than 40 degrees, and you can see on the right there is the insulated ceiling, and then directly outside the same roof type, ColourBond roof, is an uninsulated color like patio, and you can see the difference in temperature there. So 47 degrees compared to 31.1. Um, Shows you why it's just so important to have good insulation. Uh, in terms of my insulated ceiling, if I look at that there, that looks pretty good, better than my walls at least. I can't see any gaps or anything like that. Normally, if there was an issue, it'd be all kind of chunky looking. And then just out of interest, I was also looking at my walls at the same time because I've got stud walls with insulation inside, and it doesn't look too bad. On the left there, it looks pretty even. Down the bottom left-hand corner, there's a bit that's missing. Maybe the same thing happened. They just ran out of insulation or something there. But the kind of really interesting thing about this is the steel frame. So unfortunately, a steel framed house does wick heat from outside in and inside out if it doesn't have some sort of insulation in between the steel frame and the gyprock. So in this case, it did not, and you can see how hot the frame is compared to the rest of the wall. I actually don't even need the thermal camera. I can put my hand on the wall and find all the studs because they're that hot. So this, yeah, look, this is an example of why if you're building a house now, you've got a huge opportunity to get things right because this is obviously not something I can fix now that the house has been built. And this is like a giant kind of the heater across my entire wall when in summertime. All right, so the next thing was the windows. And so you all kind of intuitively know the hot windows in your house. They're usually on the east or on the west side of your house. And they're the ones you really need to work on. And the best thing is if you can stop the sun hitting your windows in the first place with shading that might look something like this. So these shades are covering the west facing windows. There's like those roller blinds. And then on the pergola to the north, we've got some shade as well. The great thing about shade cloth is you can just kind of roll it up in summer and let the, sorry, in winter and let the sun in, and then roll it down in summer when you need the shade. And the old green yeah, shade cloth, probably not very aesthetic, but there's lots of lovely shade like colors out there you can get in shade cloth. There's shutters and there's all sorts of things that you can use. Basically, you just need to stop that light hitting the window. We inherited this this very large roll of good quality block out shade cloth, and when I saw the price new, I was like, okay, green shade cloth is fine. But you can also use like a vine or plant a tree. That would probably do a good job, even better job, and look much prettier. A deciduous vine is another good option because it allows the warmth in winter as well. And then once you've stopped the heat hitting the window, the next thing you can do is insulate the windows even further with thick rubber-backed curtains or with a pelmet or honeycomb blinds. And I'll show you. Unfortunately, my stock photos could not find me any nice pictures of curtains with pelmets, but I guess these pictures do show you why it works so well, because the heat coming through the window is stopped by all the folds of the curtains, and then the heat tries to go up, but it's stopped by the pelmet. So no heat is really getting into the room with something like that. So while, yeah, these curtains are probably not to everyone's taste, the people that live in these houses are probably very comfortable. Uh, and then this one over here on the right is the honeycomb blind. So they're another really great insulated window covering, even better if they've got tracks along the side that the honeycomb blinds can sit in, because that way you're not getting any heat getting around the sides of the honeycomb blind as well. Yeah, so if you don't like the idea of a visible pelmet, I have also heard about invisible pelmets, which is basically like a bit of corflute, I think, that sits across the top of your curtain rail and stops the heat getting up that way. Some people use dowels or just even rolled up towels and stuff like that to stop the heat getting in. There's quite a few options there. All right, so gaps and air gaps. This one, pretty self-explanatory. You kind of just find the holes in your house and you block them up. There's another great diagram from the Your Home technical manual, which shows you places where air can be getting in and out of your house. So that's like a really good checklist that you can go through and just go around your house, use the thermal camera to see if yeah, if air's getting in through those places. It's especially things like old chimneys, gaps from shrinkage or your house settling, gaps around windows, check if all your door seals are still good, that sort of thing. Sealing your home will be okay for most houses because they're just very leaky to start with in Australia. But we also do need to be aware of ventilating your home adequately to avoid condensation and also indoor air pollution issues, especially if you have gas appliances, because gas appliances give off a lot of indoor air pollutants. If you're thinking about doing some gap filling, that link there is a really good one to have a read of to make sure you're getting the balance right. And also, there is a very important safety tip in your energy audit kit manual, which talks about making sure you have any gas appliances serviced regularly by a licensed gas fitter. Um, okay, so imagine your house is now nice and insulated, kind of like an esky. You can see why it's going to take a lot less energy to heat and cool, but you still want to choose the most efficient heating and cooling system as possible. And look, fans are great. We all know about fans, but the next best option after that is a split system aircon or reverse cycle aircon is another thing it's called. And it's also often the cheapest way to heat your home as even cheaper than sort of gas heaters, and it doesn't have all those harmful air pollutants that are associated with it as well. So lots of people have a split system for cooling, and then they've also got a gas heater for heating. So one of the cheapest things for them to do is just use the split system for heating instead. And the reason why they're so efficient is because they're powered by this really super efficient heat pump technology. So basically, for every 1 kilowatt of energy that goes in, you can get 3 to 4 kilowatts of heat or cool out using the magic of refrigerants. Now, as an aside, something that confused me, and so I'm passing on to you so you also know. The amount of heat or cool put out by an aircon is also measured in kilowatts. So don't get too worried if you see a 7 kilowatt heat pump aircon, that might be its cooling or heating capacity. The power input is how much power it uses. So this is the nameplate on one of my air conditioner down here, and you can see down here the power input's about 1 kilowatt, and compare that to my oil-filled column heater I showed you before, which was 2.4 kilowatts. So they use very little power. One of the workshops I did there was a guy who was a lecturer at TAFE in heating and ventilation and air conditioning, and he came up to me afterwards and he gave me a really good tip, which is when you're looking at your installer, choose someone who has a certificate 3 in refrigerant and air conditioning, because they've had a lot more training in sizing your system to the room that it's being put in, and yeah, all those sorts of things. So you're probably most likely to get the most energy efficient option out of them, and also an Arctic refrigerant handling license, which is really important for making sure those refrigerants are contained and not released into the atmosphere. And so I'll talk a bit more about refrigerants in a little bit as well. But he said ask for those 2 qualifications when you're getting an installer, and that will help ensure you get a good system installed. All right, so even within split systems, though, there are some that are more energy efficient than others, and that's why you look at the Energy Star rating. And the Energy Star rating sticker is a bit different for aircons compared to other appliances, and that's because heat pumps perform differently in different climates. So the energy rating label gives you a different star rating based on which climate you come from. And yeah, so that's just choose the one that's got the highest stars that you can afford, basically. And to get them working even better, it's good to make sure that your air conditioner is between those ranges in winter and summer, because every degree actually makes quite a huge difference to your heating and cooling bill. And then finally, to keep them running efficiently, make sure you clean your filters, because the aircon has to work so much harder to suck air through dirty filters, and it's using a lot more power if you don't clean them regularly. So if you don't know how to do that, then just go and check the manual on your aircon. All right, so the next biggest area is appliances. They use about a quarter of the energy in an average home. And so to find out how much your appliance use, you can also use a calculator. So Synergy's got a similar calculator on their website for dishwashers and washing machines and that sort of thing. But again, they're based on lots of assumptions. And why do that when you've got a device in your energy audit kit that lets you measure exactly how much you're using? So you can use that your PowerMate on your indoor normal, all your indoor normal appliances that have a plug. Now, so the big things that you might want to check when you're using that is things that are on a lot of the time or appliances that are used to heat or cool. So fridges, entertainment equipment, yeah, heaters, things like that. And to use the PowerMate, what you do, you just sort of plug it into the wall and then you plug the appliance into the plug. There are a lot more detailed instructions in the kit, so just follow them if you want a step-by-step instruction. But basically, you hold the run button down to clear all the previous data, and then you press run again, and then you leave it for a while. And then you can look at the energy in kilowatt hours, how much that's using, the cost, and it'll also have the carbon emissions. And you can scroll between them by pressing the menu button. So you can see up the top is the real. So that's how much power it's used in dollars since you've turned it on. Then that's extrapolating out to how much that will use over an hour, over a quarter, and over a year. So you can see this appliance is using like $188 worth of power every year. So really handy tool. And so just as an example, I put a PowerMate on my newest freezer and I left it on for 24 hours because freezers and fridges cycle on and off. So the PowerMate needs to stay on for a while to get an accurate reading. And on the Energy Star sticker, it said it used about 177 kilowatt hours per year. But when I put the PowerMate on, I found out it was using actually 234 kilowatt hours per year. And I thought, that's a little bit high. So then I used the thermometer that's in the energy audit kit to measure what my freezer temperature was. And it was just on the low side of the recommended temp. So I turned down my freezer just a little bit from like 5.5 to 5, and that went down to 185 kilowatt hours per year. So look, you can't get too carried away with that particular result. The difference was 50 kilowatt hours over a whole year. And if you multiply that by the energy cost in your power bill, so for most people, that's 32 cents at the moment. That saved me about $17 in power over a year. But I still, I think I can still take myself out for a coffee and cake with those savings. But look, your fridge or freezer might be using much more than that. And I did do an energy audit when I was doing a uni assignment a few years ago, and my fridge and freezer was using 1,000 kilowatt hours per year. So that was actually a couple of $100 worth of power, and did for us end up being worth replacing it. So if you want to know how much you would save by upgrading, then you can just go into the energy rating calculator. This is a really great website and very easy to use. What you could just do is pop in there and select a potential model that you might compare your energy use to, and then have a look at that compared to what the figure is on your PowerMate, and you can see whether your whatever you're measuring is performing well or not. And then once you're actually in the market for buying a new appliance, you can compare the appliances that you're choosing between, and it'll show you which one is the best option. So, for example, this is for a friend of mine. She used her dryer every day, and I compared two models for her there. And so for things like dryers, especially if you're using them every day, the savings can be really quite large. So this was comparing a 2-star dryer with a 7-star dryer, which is a heat pump dryer, so very much very efficient, but costs quite a bit more upfront. So you can see that the heat pump dryer costs where is it? $1,200 compared to $500 for just a normal old 2-star dryer. So I think most people would probably balk when they went to buy a dryer and it was that much more expensive. But you can see that over its lifetime, over 10 years, it well and truly pays off that upfront cost, and it saves about $3,500 on top of that. So really worth, if you're buying a new appliance, it's really worth popping onto energyrating.gov.au and comparing the options. So the energy rating label is pretty self-explanatory. It basically compares how much energy different products use. More stars means more energy efficient. It's all based on standardized testing under Australian New Zealand standards, so you can have some confidence that it's like relatively real. But of course, like you just saw, the amount of estimated power use does depend on how they're assuming people use the appliance, and whereas you might use it differently, as you saw with my freezer. So the next biggest consumer is your hot water system. And so that's also nearly a quarter of an average home's energy use. So this one is a big opportunity to save energy. Unfortunately, Synergy doesn't have a hot water system calculator, which is a shame because I found it really hard to find anything else that was sort of equivalent. But it's safe to say, hot water is a big one. And the first thing you can do to reduce your energy use is to reduce your hot water use. And because showers make up such a big proportion of your hot water use, focusing on your showers is a really good way to reduce your energy use. So people get a bit worried when I say that because they say, you're going to ask me to have a shorter shower, aren't you? And I can say, yes, look, if you can have a shorter shower, that's great. But it does, of course, depend on lots of things like how many teenagers you've got in the house and how likely they are to listen to you and things like that. So something else you can do is to change your shower head. Now, if you have an instantaneous hot water system, changing your shower head can cause you problems. You need to probably chat to a plumber about whether it's possible for you. But if you've got a gas or electric storage system, it is a really great idea to check your shower head to see if it's efficient or not. I thought for years that my shower heads were just efficient just by looking at them. And then I had to do a uni assignment as part of that, I measured how much they were using. And I was really embarrassed to find out they were actually using 13 litres per minute. And I've audited other shower heads when I used to work for local government, and often find some that were up to 20 litres per minute. They should all be using 9 litres per minute or under. So what I did was replace mine with this very efficient ultra low flow shower head, and that only uses about 5 litres per minute. And a lot of people say, "Oh, that sounds terrible. You'll have to run around to get wet." But it actually has this particular way it sprays out water, and it's a little bit different, but it's a very nice shower. No one in my family's complained. People are also shocked when I tell them that the shower head cost a couple of $100. But even at a couple of $100, it pays itself off very quickly. So when I did that uni assignment, I had to calculate how long it would take to pay off, and I worked out it would take only about 6 months, just because energy use, hot water is a huge part of our energy use, and if you can reduce it, those types of actions are going to have a quick payback. You don't need to go that extreme if you don't want to. Like if you test your shower head and if it's really high, then a 3-star shower head's going to definitely still help. So the easiest way to test your shower head is with the bucket. And basically you just hold the bucket under the shower head, let the water run on full for 15 seconds, then you measure the water there and then multiply it by 4, and then you have the liters per minute. Now, I think the reason that YouTube just popped up was because I accidentally clicked that link, which is to a really great little video, which is very short and just shows you how to do that. So that's a link that's in your sheet of links that I'll show you at the end as well. Um, all right. Now, in the energy audit kit, there's another little cup called a flow tester cup, and that's another one that you can use to test your taps as well. So it's pretty easy to use. You just pop the cup under the tap, make sure it's completely under the water, and then just turn the tap on full, and then you open the little handles to the point where the water is just flat on the top, and then at that point you can measure what the thing says on the cup, and then that way you know what your flow rate is across for your taps. So that's another handy one as well. They should also be about 9 litres per minute, and if they're more than that, you might like to put an aerator or a restrictor or something like that on there. When it comes to the hot water system itself, you have a huge opportunity to reduce your energy consumption and costs when your old one dies and you get a new one. So buying a hot water system is going to affect your power bills for probably a decade to come. So you really need to make sure that you're ready for that decision, because a lot of people, when their hot water system dies, they just will get whatever the plumber tells them because they just want to have a hot shower again. Um, the general consensus now is that the most efficient option is a heat pump hot water system, and they use very little power, but they are more expensive upfront. So once you've done your research and you decided whether that's sort of the one for you, it's good to be prepared because it allows you to budget for it. That link there is another great one. It's a buyer's guide from a website called Solar Quotes, which gives a lot of information about buying solar, but also about heat pumps and electric vehicles and all sorts of other things too. So that's a really good one to look at. It talks about how they work, how much they cost, the reputable brands and things that are out there. So that's a good place to start with some research. It's around about now I'd show you another calculator so you can work out roughly what switching to a heat pump is going to save you. But like I said, I couldn't find one. So instead, I'm going to show you this study, which was done by Renew in 2021, which worked out the savings of going all electric in WA, which is important because our electricity and gas prices are a bit different to other states. And they calculated the savings for a few different scenarios, like big houses and small houses, if you've got lots of gas appliances or you've only got one. And these were the results for replacing a gas hot water system at the end of its life with a heat pump in a medium home. So in this case, the heat pump was on a timer to come on in the middle of the day to make the most of the solar. And I think most come with a timer, but when you do your research, just, yeah, sort of double check that yours does. So anyway, they found that replacing a gas hot water heater with a heat pump had a payback of 5 years with no solar and 3 years with solar. So the heat pump paid off its additional upfront costs quite quickly. And yeah, these were the total savings over 10 years. So they're pretty good, especially if you've got solar panels. Anyway, so if you're interested in that report, I've got a link to it there. Delves, if you're the kind of person that likes to delve into the detail, you can look at all the different scenarios and work out which is, works best for your situation. So refrigerants, heat pumps use refrigerants, and while they are magic, they can also pose a problem for climate change because if they escape, they have the potential to warm the planet many more times than carbon dioxide. And so, yeah, that's why you need to have fridges to gas and stuff like that. So when you're selecting your heat pump, you may want to consider the global warming potential of the refrigerants. And some of the better and more efficient heat pumps actually use carbon dioxide, which has the lowest global warming potential of the options, followed by things like R290, which is propane, and then R32, and then R30 134A has got quite a high global warming potential, so you might want to avoid that one. And so, and then some of these other ones are now starting to be phased out and banned in lots of different places, so it's difficult to get those regassed. So yeah, just something to think about. And another reason why it's good to find that Arctic accredited installer when you're looking at like heating and cooling options. And finally, we've got lighting, and lighting seems to be the thing people think about first when it comes to saving energy, like switching off your lights and stuff. But as you can see, it's actually a very small proportion of the bill. So if you got a big bill and all you did was just go around and switch the lights off a bit more, you can see why you probably wouldn't see a big difference in your bill. I'm much more likely to be the mum telling off my kids for having the aircon on when they're not in the room than they are for leaving the lights on. And luckily, lighting is pretty easy. LED lighting is the most efficient and it's got the longest life of the lighting types. It uses significantly less energy than an incandescent light, which you can't even get anymore. You're probably going to be replacing compact fluorescent lights now. And so in this table, you can see they are a bit more efficient than a CFL. And yeah, because these lights are sort of more mainstream now, that's probably why lighting is a relatively small proportion of the average family use. When you might not be average is if you have halogens. And so this is where the synergy calculator is really useful again. And you can see on the left-hand side there, that is the cost for running 20 halogens for 6 hours per day. compared to on the right, which is the cost of running 20 LEDs for the same amount of time. So it's much, much less for running LEDs. If you've got a lot of halogen downlights, you could well be using more than that 9% of your energy use. And this could be quite a high priority to address. Sale of new halogen lighting has now been banned since 2021. So it's going to be harder and harder to get bulbs and things anyway. So replacing halogen lighting might be a big priority. All right, so they're the major energy users in an average house and some of the big stuff, things you can do to get noticeable cuts in your power bill. But sometimes you might have big power bills because something is going wrong. And that's when you can investigate using your interval data, which you can get from My Account website, if you have a smart meter. So you'd have a smart meter if you've been had one installed as part of Western Power's program to install them across Perth, or if you when you installed solar panels, you would probably get one. You would get one then. You can also request one, and it costs about $100. Sorry, not $1,000, $100 to get one put in. And it's got some really useful data with it. You can just find it under My Account under energy usage and interval data. And you can see there it shows you energy use every 30 minutes. And as part of that, you can pick up on strange patterns that, might indicate issues that you're going to get a big power bill. And here's an example of what you might see when something goes wrong. This is when a hot water leak started. And so you can see at the top, that's just like a typical kind of day. And then the hot water system leak starts, and you can see that it's the hot water system's coming on more and more often to replace the water that's being lost. Over the coming weeks, it gets worse and worse until eventually they've gone from 20 kilowatt hours a day, which is $8 a day, up to $31 a day in power use. So by the time you get your bill, if you haven't noticed that leak, it's going to be a very nasty shock. So that's a really good way sort of to keep an eye on your energy use and try and work out what's going on if you've got a big bill. The interval data is sort of only useful to you if you log in and have a look at it, but there's also other energy monitors which will show you data more easily on a display or in an app. You've got little displays like this one where you can go around and switch things on and off to see how much energy is being used by different parts of the house. Another type is this consumption and production monitoring, which you can ask to have put on when you get solar panels. I really like this because it lets you see your solar overlaid over your consumption, and therefore lets you see how much spare solar you've got and how, the things that you need to do to sort of shift your power to use up your extra solar. Yeah. If you need to get down into an even finer grain, that's where the PowerMate is a really good option in your energy audit kit. There's also ones you can buy as well, and even ones like little smart plugs that you can plug things into, and they will show you your power use on an app and clever things like that. And if you've looked at all of those things and you're still stuck on why you've got high bills, it might be time to call in an expert. So, at home energy efficiency audit is done when a professional comes to your house. They assess where your energy is going and they give you personalized recommendations. So, yeah, that's another good one. The other thing is a NatHERS assessment if you're building a house. That's a assessment on the thermal performance of your house plans. So that's a really good thing to do right at the start to make sure you're not going to get stuck with a giant heater in your wall like me with my steel frame. And for more information as well, there is a really great Facebook page called My Efficient Electric Home, where people have asked all of the home energy efficiency questions there basically is to ask. So you can go in there and search. I would suggest if you're going to go in there and search, try and find a WA specific one, because sometimes some of the stuff from over east, like they've just got a different energy market and all sorts of stuff. It's not quite as relevant here. So try and find WA specific posts that relate to your question. And yeah, you should be able to find them because there's so many posts on there. The guy who started it wrote a book called My Efficient Electric Home Handbook. That is a really good book to read as well, which talks about the process of going all electric. There's the Your Home Technical Manual, which I've shown you pictures from today. That's all available online. So there's a link to that in your resource sheet as well. And another great book to read is The Big Switch, and that's by the guy who started Rewiring Australia, and that gives some of the bigger picture about going all electric as well. All right. Well, with that, we might be able to finish up. Thank you so much for coming along, everyone. It's really, yeah, great to see so many people interested in this topic. Yeah, and like we said, sign up to Switch Your Thinking's e-news if you want to hear about more workshops that are coming up. All right. Have a lovely evening.